one of your co-hosts for this show, and then we got our other co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing?
Been great, McGinnis. It's good to be on another show for you. Haven't seen you in quite a while.
Yeah, I know. It's been about, maybe 2 minutes since since the NFL show, which is funny because we're actually about to go into our NFL news first. And since we just did the NFL show, we can just cover this briefly.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this because if you want to see our full takes about the Thursday night football game between the Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals, go on, hop over to the Grueling Truth Facebook page. We already filmed an NFL show covering all the in-depth news you want to hear. But really briefly, Drew Brees, they confirmed his injuries, cracked ribs on both sides, collapsed lung. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Christian McCaffrey has a shoulder injury. He will be ruled out as well and not play this weekend. The Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals play tonight. We've already made our picks. I picked the Cardinals, and you picked the Seattle Seahawks. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. Yeah. The winner of that game will be the new leader in the NFC West. Yeah, and that's really all I have for the NFL news. Like I said, we already covered it. So please go watch that episode of the NFL show on the Grueling Truth Facebook page. But we can move on from there. There's not too much to talk about for the NFL news.
Yeah, we can move on to the MLB here because you have some stuff for this. I'm surprised you have MLB news. We don't usually have a lot on this.
It's not usually my thing, but I am a little bit of a Mets fan, and it's a little frustrating to see what's happening with Robinson Cano right now. He has been suspended for the entirety of the upcoming season because of another run with PEDs. This is the second time he's tested positive for enhancing drugs during his career. I think he tested back in 2018 as well because he only played 80 games that season. He was fairly productive with the Mets this year. He was not obviously near the superstar caliber player that he was with the New York Yankees. He never really got back to that level since leaving the team, but he did bat .316, which is pretty good for him. So I'll take what production he gave us. However, now he's going to miss the upcoming season. He will have to forfeit his $24 million salary that I think gives the New York Mets and their new owner, who is loaded, by the way, a lot of money to go spend on a lot of really good players. So I'm really excited to see how the Mets get younger here and how they continue to improve. Another NFL news, teams are starting to go through layoffs because of the pandemic. Now, most teams in the NBA and the NFL, they have enough money to avoid layoffs. And I'm not saying they haven't occurred in those leagues. They certainly have in stadiums because they haven't had to bring as many fans into the stadiums as they normally would. But there are significant layoffs occurring in baseball right now, specifically because it's a little more – you can make a little less money, I would say, the MLB does than the NBA and the NHL – I mean, the NBA and the NFL because of those games. So there are some layoffs occurring right now. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Hopefully they get their jobs back. Hopefully things start running back to normal again. But for now, it looks like people are starting to getting laid off more frequently as a couple of teams now have committed to laying off a few people.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because the problem comes to this. The MLB already had an attendance issue. So then adding to it by not being able to let as many fans into the stadium is just it's just more on the MLB, which already had a problem in this area.
Yeah, Major League Baseball has an issue now because they can't afford to pay everyone they have in the past. You see people losing their jobs. It's just unfortunate when you hit this point. But like you said, this is not something that was entirely unheard of and probably was predictable in the last couple of months. It's just starting to hit Major League Baseball right now during the offseason. But that's all for Major League Baseball news. We can turn to the NHL, which is your specialty. So let's hear it, McGinnis. What do you have for us?
All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, because we have not talked about this yet, even though it was a little while ago, is Mike Emmerich retiring. And in my personal opinion, I think he is pretty much everything you want out of an announcer. I don't know how many of you have listened to Mike Emmerich, how many of you have ever really watched the NHL or major NHL games. But if you have not, just do it for the treat of it not being a boring NFL announcer. I tell you, this guy is one of the most energetic announcers. Other announcers should be they should be looking at his book. They should be figuring out how he did what he did and being excited the way he is excited because he calls games unlike other announcers do.
Yeah, the only announcer who I can think of, because I just remembered this, who would be anywhere close to him in terms of the job he does during the games is Mike Breen for the NBA. He's fantastic. He's the guy who always shouts bang whenever people hit clutch shots. He's great. And he's won awards for his work as well. So to me, those two are the best announcers that I've ever heard in sports. It takes it to another level. When you have that energy from an announcer like that, it really just kind of brings the game a lot more. So not having that energy I mean, it doesn't have to be someone who's young either being the announcer. It could be anyone of any age, so long as you can feel the excitement in their voices and bring it to the game. If you don't have that, I mean, that's automatically a loss, and you don't want to replace them with. I mean, they're not going to be able, obviously, for quite a while because you just don't find people like this every day.
Yeah, I just don't understand because you can find people with energy. That's not the issue. A lot of this, I wonder if it's more networking than it is anything, but it's unfortunate in that sense because it brings lesser content than to the mass. Rather than finding the best guy for the job, you find the guy you like for the job, which is just unfortunate because we may not get another guy like Mike Emmerich again. And one of the suggestions I heard for the new guy coming in, I was just like, oh goodness, please do not. We need a guy that's got energy like Mike, like Doc, because that's just how one of the reasons the NHL gets you so pumped up is because when there's a goal, he screams. He doesn't go touchdown and then he's just done. Like it's not Joe Buck.
Yeah, pretty much. It'll be interesting to see how all works out from here going forward and who actually steps in to fill his enormous role within the NHL. But you also have some other news you want to talk about with potentially a new division.
Yeah, so we've got so we talked about this a little, or pardon me, we haven't really talked about this much. We talked about the Metropolitan Division last time, which might be staying intact. We don't know yet. But there is a scenario in which the NHL will start, but teams won't be able to cross the Canadian border and be able to play in Canada. So one of the suggestions brought up was to make a Canadian division, which I think would be really fun to watch. Now, this is unfortunate for the Canadian teams because if you're a Canadian and you're hoping that one of your teams will win the Stanley Cup, this kind of hurts your odds, actually. But at the same time, with a lot of those teams not being very good, it could also help them in a sense also. But I think overall it may just hurt them just because you're eliminating more teams within your own division. But we can look at this real quick, and I'll run this down with you. So you've got the Canucks who picked up a new goaltender. So did the Canucks. So you have some goaltenders moving around in this mess. Here's my thing: the Maple Leafs have a shot here. Unlike with their old division where you have the Lightning and the Boston Bruins, who are really the number 1 and 2 team in that division. There really isn't any disputing it. They're also possibly the number 1 and 2 team in the NHL in the same division, which is unfortunate for the Maple Leafs because they're actually a good team. But now you've got a lot of good, but not a whole lot of great teams in this potential Canadian division. So the Maple Leafs might actually have a shot to win this, which is not normal for them.
Yeah, I'm looking through it right now. So this put the top 3 teams, would this end up being basically the Flames, the Maple Leafs, and the Canadians, and possibly the Canucks? Those would be the 4 teams that would really be relevant in this division, right?
Well, if I was gonna run down it, I would definitely have the Flames, the Canucks, the Maple Leafs, and the Oilers because I think the Oilers had a little bit of a better season last year. Though I did predict their loss to the Chicago Blackhawks. I don't really trust the Oilers fully, but I think you do have some talent there. But out of all these teams, I'm not sure there's a legitimate number 1 Stanley Cup contender even in this division. Like the only. Yeah, I'm unsure. Like there might be a dark horse or an outlying Stanley Cup contender in this division, but there's no like Tampa Bay Lightning or what was the St. Louis Blues or Colorado Avalanche or the Washington Capitals, though I don't trust them either. There's not that team in this division. So it brings a lot of opportunity for teams that might not be doing as well to, if they can get hot, they can really take over an easier division.
Yeah, I'm looking into this right now, and there's no teams coming from the Metropolitan Division into this new hypothetical one. And I believe we talked about this the other day. The Metropolitan Division is possibly the most loaded one in the entire league. So not taking a team from there, moving into the Canadian one, leaves that division open to basically whoever gets hot at the right time.
Yeah, and this is totally something we saw this last year with a lot of these teams that are coming from the Pacific Division. Is the Pacific Division was kind of a mess because everybody was there was no team that was super consistent in that division. But if you can get hot at the right time, you could totally get a playoff spot. Like this might even be helpful for the Canadians. I know they made the playoffs this last year, they shouldn't have had the system been normal, but they did. And the fact is, this might be a decent situation for the Canadians where if they get hot and Carey Price gets hot at the right time, they could also have a chance at making the playoffs. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider here.
Yeah, the Canadians went 31-31 last year with a -9 goal differential. So that's not a team you would ordinarily see making the playoffs when they get there. Again, in this situation, when you're playing in a weaker division now, all you need to do is get hot for a 20-game stretch or a 15-game stretch here. And if you're good during that stretch, you will automatically build yourself a lead. And you have a chance of winning every single night if you're their chances of having a good seed going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I put the Flames and the Canucks up near the top is, now remember, the Flames got the Canucks goaltender who was a dark horse Vezina candidate, and then the Washington Capitals sent Braden Holtby went to the Canucks, and then the Flames got the Canucks goal. So this is going to depend. I feel like these are the two teams that are really going to be battling out, along with maybe the Maple Leafs for the division. It might end up coming down to goaltending, but we'll have to see. But then you have to ask the question. Braden Holtby did not have a great season statistically this last year. He had help on offense. He had a great defenseman in Carl. But the question comes, will he be able to now, with a new system, new team, will he be able to now regain his form from what wasn't last year? Because last year needed some help.
Right. We stressed the importance of goaltending on the show over the past couple of weeks. And we saw a number of goaltenders move this offseason, so maybe they'll shake things up a little bit and produce some new winners. But really, it's hard to buy into players who have a couple of really good years. And when you have that one bad season, you try to buy low, maybe try to get them on a team for maybe a little cheaper than you would ordinarily. But you got to be worried that it's just going to end up being our bad season, right?
Yeah, but I do think Braden Holtby definitely has the ability to be a great goalie again, because he's a Vezina winner. Like, he's a great goaltender. He's set his own records. He's doing great. It's just last year was a bit of a what happened here kind of a thing. So hopefully it was just the 1 year. It might be more than that. We don't know. But considering his past and just the 1 year, I'm not sure you can just be like, well, he's not a good goaltender now. I'm not even saying it was a bad move to go get Braden Holtby. I think it might have been a good option, because now, after 1 year of not doing great, you might be able to, just pick him up and then have good years to come. You may have been able to just avoid the inconvenient one bad year.
Yeah, you certainly hope that's the case, because you got Braden Holtby then after just the one bad year, and you avoid that, and now he's back to his normal form. I mean, that automatically makes you a really good team. And you have pieces there already, so that would really help you out in the long run. Is there any other NHL news you want to talk about, or are we good to move on to our next topic?
I think we're good to move on. Just looking forward to what they're going to decide exactly what to do with the divisions. The divisions, all but potentially the Metropolitan, would be different if they went through with this. It's a little crazy because they're messing everything up, but it's also interesting in a sense because this is the only year this will happen. So you get a little bit of good with the bad.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they learn anything from this or take anything from this moving forward. I think they would automatically just go back to the normal divisions. They wouldn't want to mess with this any longer than they have to.
I would hope
But it'd be interesting to see how it plays out regardless. We're going to move on to some NBA news, and it's a lot of news. It's a pretty low topic so far because they had the NBA draft last night. And there's also a bunch of trades that have gone on. I mean, it's basically been nonstop NBA news. I haven't slept, McGinnis. I'm sleep deprived. But
who needs sleep?
Let's start off with some positive week. That's right, McGinnis. That's exactly what it is. Sleep is for the weekend insane. But I would say the biggest news possibly was something that didn't even come out of the draft. It was Klay Thompson. Is feared to have suffered an Achilles injury in his right leg. And if this is true, it sounds like it's being confirmed right now. It sounds like it's more than likely true. He will be out for the entire 2020-2021 NBA season. That's a huge blow to Klay Thompson, who missed the entire last year anyways, since he was rehabbing from injury suffered in the 2020 NBA Finals. There we go. I don't know if that was correct or not. 2019 NBA Finals. No, that's what it was. 2019 NBA Finals. He missed the entire year recovering from an injury he suffered during the finals, and now he's going to miss another season. And it's really disappointing, obviously, because this guy was an all-star, an all-defensive player, and a top 25 player, top 20 player when healthy, and one of the greatest shooters of all time. But the Golden State Warriors were going to have him, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and they just drafted James Wiseman last night. They were going to have all the guys on the same team together, and they were going to compete with the Warriors, with the Lakers, and with the Clippers, and with the other great teams in the NBA for an NBA championship. You remove Klay Thompson from the equation now, it becomes a lot more difficult to see them winning. And it just sucks for a great player and a really funny guy, but also for a team that is hoping to go out there and win our championship.
Well, yeah, and with the NBA being a star league, we've mentioned this 1,000 times, losing even one star can be the difference between winning and losing a championship, depending on how close the margin is.
But yeah, an Achilles injury is like the one Klay Thompson supposedly suffered. If he has indeed injured that Achilles to the point where he's going to miss the entire year, you wonder how much it's going to sap from him. The Achilles is the worst injury for the NBA. Now, it's gotten a lot better. Also, medical technology has gotten a lot better the past couple of years. You can see guys come back from Achilles injuries. Well, we haven't seen Kevin Durant from an Achilles injury. He hasn't come back and played yet. DeMarcus Cousins suffered an Achilles injury. He's not been the same since then. And Klay Thompson, this was a guy who's an all-defensive caliber player. You take away the Achilles, and suddenly he's starting to get a little bit slower, a little bit less explosive. I wonder how it will impact him on that end of the court moving forward. But moving away from the negative news, a lot of trades went through the past couple of days. The Dallas Mavericks sent Seth Curry to Philadelphia in exchange for Josh Richardson, so two teams swapping shooting guards there. The Philadelphia also sent out the Oklahoma City Thunder for Danny Green and Terrence Ferguson. I wouldn't rule out Philadelphia potentially moving Danny Green again, but this is a good move for them. Of a very bad contract that Al Horford had, it actually frees up a lot of space for you, and frankly, your line just worked better without him in it. The Milwaukee Bucks traded for Drew Holiday. What they sent in exchange, I know you're not a huge NBA fan, but I think you'll be able to grasp just how much they traded for Drew Holiday. They sent Eric Bledsoe first-round picks to New Orleans for Drew Holiday.
Whoa.
So the Milwaukee Bucks are all in.
Crap.
They're all in.
Is there even a hold it? Is there even
they're
a
all in on winning.
Here's the thing. Is there even a single player in the NFL that, and I know this is a different league, but is there even a single player in the NFL that you could trade 3 first-round picks for and all the whoever did this either decided that this is it or just like you probably didn't even need to pay that much. Like, I doubt it. That is one of the worst things I've heard in a long time with trades. The
Bucks got strong armed in this because I agree that three
first round picks
trades plus 2 players is a lot.
I mean, unless you were getting like LeBron James
in
or
the
something.
NBA, it's not as crazy. Yeah, it's not as crazy in the NBA. I think Anthony Davis, I believe, was a first-round player that year. So you could say Anthony Davis, when he got traded last year, was technically traded for 4 first-round picks. You could technically say. Holly, on the other hand, is near Anthony Davis in terms of his potential and skill, but he was still traded for 3 first-round picks, and here's why. The Bucks are not sold on the idea that Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to play for them next year. He's a free agent after this coming season, and he is not committed to signing a long-term deal. The Bucks need to show him that they are committed to winning immediately. They need to put as many pieces around him to win the title this year. They really are building for the short term, not the long term, which is why they're willing to trade that many picks to New Orleans. And here's what the Pelicans knew that. The Pelicans knew they can hold that against the Bucks and get as many picks as they wanted out of them. Also, the Pelicans didn't have to trade Drew Holiday. So they have a bunch of young guys on the team, and they needed a veteran player. Drew Holiday, by the way, was a 2019-2020 Teammate of the Year. I didn't know that was an award, but apparently it is. So he's a really good guy. He's a quality veteran player, and he's not too over expensive. So the Pelicans didn't need to trade him, but because they knew the Bucks were desperate, they were able to leverage it against Milwaukee. And they got 3 first-round picks, plus a starter in Eric Bledsoe and a quality bench player in George Hill.
Yeah, that's what you call overpaying. And here's the thing. I think the mentality of we should win now, there's a rare situation when I think that is appropriate. Because look at teams like the Patriots, which is your ideal situation. But then you've got the Saints. You've got these teams who over time, even though they've got the potential to win a championship, they're not screwing themselves over. They're still planning to continue, because the more chances you get, the better. If you're betting on 1 year, even if you've got it all together, unless of course it's the NBA, generally that's just a poor idea. And with the NBA being less of a Golden State, Cleveland only section now, I feel like this is a poor decision, because you've still got great stars on other teams as well who could beat you even if you've got everything right going for you. So I think putting it all on 1 year or just a couple years is worse potentially than if you had multiple years with a little bit less.
Yeah, I would say this. I don't even know if this move is intended specifically to win a championship. Obviously, that's the end goal they want to have. But I think the bigger goal here with getting Drew Holiday was to make sure that Giannis re-signs. That's what they were aiming for. They weren't thinking necessarily about winning a championship first. It was more about getting Giannis back first and then winning a championship. So to me, I don't like that logic. I really don't. I think you always have to put winning a championship first. Drew Holiday could help you with that. But I think really this move is made primarily to satisfy Giannis instead of actually building to win a championship. And because of that, I question the motivations of the Bucks, and I also question the amount they gave up, whether that was absolutely necessary to get a player like Drew Holiday. So I have concerns there. I'm not saying it's insane. Obviously, I do like the addition of Drew Holiday for the Bucks, but I think there are some concerns there with that move.
Yeah, 3 first round. I'm not familiar with the fact that the NBA does that, but with the NFL, that the immediate thought I had was 3 first round picks. Who would do that? And then with it being all the other things on top of that, yeah, poor decision making. Poor decision making at its best, folks.
Yeah, I think with the NBA, draft picks are valued a lot less than the NFL because the success rate of drafting players in the NFL is a lot higher than in the NBA. There are very limited picks also. You only have 2 rounds in the NBA draft, and realistically, only about 16 of the total draft picks, they'll say, in the entire draft, you'll have 60 players taken. Only about 16 of those guys are going to turn out to be legitimate players who can be starters or role players consistently. So really, you have a much lower percent chance of hitting with those picks. That's why you trade them so frequently, I think you could say, is because the proven players like Drew Holiday are worth so much more than the potential players they get in the first round picks. But that wasn't the only trade that happened the past couple of days. The Suns acquired the Oklahoma City Thunder for Kelly Oubre Jr., Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, and a first-round pick. Ricky Rubio subsequently traded to Timberwolves, the team that he originally played for. And the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James had traded Danny Green, a first-round pick, for Dennis Schroeder from the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder have been quite involved in a lot of trades this weekend, I'm realizing. Schroeder was a 6th Man of the Year candidate this past year. He's a huge help for them. Outside of that, I would just like to say that Anthony Edwards was taken first overall, James Wiseman second, LaMelo Ball third. So Edwards goes number 1 overall, which is not shocking. I don't think this draft class is particularly deep, though, in terms of there have been past couple of years who are much more successful or much better in terms of the prospects at the top from this year. James Wiseman at 2 Golden State Warriors. I love that one. LaMelo Ball at 3 to Michael Jordan's team, the Hornets. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't like the fit too much. But at the same point, I recognize LaMelo Ball was probably the best player on the board at the time. Other than that, I'm just going really quickly here. I don't want to waste too much time in the NBA here. I know this is taking up a huge segment. We'll get to thinking you're dreaming really quickly here. Some steals of the draft. RJ Hampton at 24 is playing for the Denver Nuggets. That was a really good pick for me. Xavier Tillman to Memphis at 35, another one I really like. Even though I don't think he'll put up great numbers in the NBA, I think he'll still play a role really well. Trey Jones, a great defender at 41 to San Antonio. That's a great pick for Greg Popovich. He'll fit in immediately right there. And Cassius Winston from Michigan State at 53 to Washington. He's a chance, in my opinion, to actually become a star for the Washington Wizards because I love Winston so much. Not the most athletically accomplished player, but at the same point, still good enough to me to take over and play a good role on a very bad team.
So here's the thing. This is the sport that I can actually be proud of MSU for.
Yeah, basketball produces plenty of really good players for basketball, McGinnis. I will credit you with that. You've got plenty of good basketball players coming out of MSU.
Yeah, it was just the football team used to be good, and they're dead now. So at least there's basketball. There's something the school can be proud of sports-wise.
let me just say, Cash Winston and Trey Jones to me, two of the best steals of the draft. Those would be great picks. Trey Jones, obviously from Duke, Cash Winston from Michigan State. But we'll move on now to a other segment of the show that we like to call Think You're Dreaming. This is probably the most fun one, McGinnis. So, who do you want to ask a question first? Should I ask you a question first, or should you ask me?
We'll go back and forth this time. We'll mix it up a little. But you can go first.
Oh, we're changing it up a little bit. Okay, all right. So let me ask you one then. Is this Think You're Dreaming? Tom Brady is an MVP candidate this season.
That's dreaming. Not necessarily because he's not doing good, but because he's not doing good enough with players like Josh Allen and what was Russell Wilson, and he could still get back on that potentially. But Patrick Mahomes, 25 touchdowns to 1 interception. I didn't look at what he did this last week, but I assume that it also still get better, even if he had a bad week, which I don't think he did. Patrick Mahomes is leading in my mind. And Tom Brady is not 25 touchdowns and 1 interception right now. He's doing very well, but he's not of that caliber.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Brady, for the record, is 23 touchdowns to 7 interceptions right now. I think Brady was number 4 on my most recent quarterback power rankings list, but at the same point, the gap between 4 and 3 for me is huge. Well, actually, no, I might have had him at 3. But either way, the gap between 3 and 2 is huge. The gap between him, Aaron Rodgers, and Patrick Mahomes is enormous. I don't think he'll close it this season. And even if he did, I would still rather have Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara as an MVP candidate than Tom Brady.
All right, my turn. The NHL will find a boring announcer like the NFL does to announce its major games.
McGinnis, you know what? You're absolutely thinking here. This is what happens every time. You know, whenever someone retires, someone as legendary as that retires, the next person who comes in to step in to fill that role always looks bad. Even if he's not necessarily a bad announcer, it's just the fact that you're replacing a legend. It never looks nearly as good. And if you do find someone who does NFL games or someone who is more of that track and that mindset, there's just so few guys who are as good as Doc at announcing games. I just don't think that you're going to find another guy like that. Maybe you will, but really, I could say an 85% chance you don't. Just it's a rare breed. You don't find legends like that too often.
Yeah, it's genuinely unfortunate for the entire league. But I will say again, if you haven't heard Doc, look him up. You will be very happy and wish that you had watched the NHL more, just for the sake of being excited more often, because there are way more bad announcers than good announcers in this league. And I want to throw this out on the topic of announcers real quick before we move on to your second question. What do you think of Tony Romo as an announcer? I've personally enjoyed what he has done. I thought he's done pretty well, but that's just my opinion.
Oh, I love Tony Romo as an announcer because, A, he calls the plays half the time before they actually happen, and also he breaks it down in a way that, I can understand the game. Sometimes we see guys who will break it down, some older players who will break the game down, but it's more about just commenting on what actually happened. I can see that. But Tony Romo actually breaks down the play and tells you this is what the player was thinking. This is what they were probably told to do. This is what the play was drawn up. To me, it's extra insight into the game. Also, Romo is he's fun-loving on camera at the very least. He's very fun-loving. He comes across as he loves the game. He loves what he's doing. I really appreciate that as a fan.
All right, we can move on to your number 2 then.
Yeah, my second question. The Arizona Cardinals will win the NFC. Is that I think your dream?
Okay. So this is another one where it's technically on the border because in reality it's thinking, but it could still be wrong. You're not insane when you make that statement, and you could still be right. That's a fairly good possibility. But at the same time, you can see Russell Wilson turning it around and the Seattle Seahawks still winning the division. And I think a lot of this could end up being determined on who wins tonight, right? So that'll be thrown into it. But yeah, it's not insane, so I kind of have to go with thinking, but you have to keep in mind this is a very fine line for the Arizona Cardinals.
I agree. They currently hold the division lead, but there are 3 teams tied. I believe, is it 6-3? I'll look at the NFL standings right now, but there are 3 teams tied for the division lead. They are all at 6-3. The Arizona Cardinals, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Seattle Seahawks. The Cardinals hold the tiebreaker over the Seattle Seahawks right now, and they play tonight. Oh, you're right. It might decide who wins the division, or at the very least, who ends up in the top spot for the next week.
Yeah. All right. The NFL, specifically, because I know we're talking a lot about announcers, but the NFL needs to talk more about DBs and linemen and less about QBs because they put too much emphasis on QBs and not enough emphasis on the places where they don't get enough credit.
Is this your defensive back bias coming out, McGinnis?
Oh, it's 100%. Is I can just tell you how difficult it is to, and we've mentioned this, but think about it. Your job is to cover basically an Olympic sprinter, or maybe not quite, but of that par, pardon me, of a great par of running, who's huge typically, and who can make insane catches. Oh, and you can't like rough them up as you're going around. You have to like magically get around them and stop the ball. But I would also say linemen because they don't get way as much credit.
Yeah, I'd say quarterbacks have a difficult job. Cornerbacks have a much more difficult job because of the fact you're right. You can't rough receivers up. You can't stay attached to them. And also, I mean, you have to stay off them, and they can move wherever they want. You have to basically predict how they're going to move and try to get in the way. And when you're matching against a guy like DK Metcalf, who's like, 6'4", ridiculous speeds, there's really no way to match. There's really no way to cover that guy. I mean, Jalen Ramsey did a really good job this past weekend, and he didn't get nearly enough credit for what he did to Metcalf. So, to me, you're right. I think corners need a lot more attention because of the job they do, because I don't think people realize how difficult it is. Because if you ever played like backyard football, it's not that difficult to cover someone your own speed. But trying to do it at the NFL level, people are throwing flags left and right, and refs are just waiting to call pass interference on you. It's much more difficult than I think people actually assume. As for defensive linemen,
I just meant linemen in general.
Credit. Yeah, I think linemen, especially offensive linemen, need a lot more talk. Defensive ends get a lot of credit, but I think the interior defensive players or 3-4 defensive ends, so guys who are not primarily pass rushers, don't get nearly as much credit as they deserve because they're kind of the trenches in general. Just is not a popular place to be.
Well, yeah, and I think that's because maybe it's a little less of the razzle-dazzle people like to see, but at the same time, this may be making the NFL more money to talk differently and more about quarterbacks, but I personally would appreciate them putting more credit where it's owed.
No, I agree. I think that would be a good way to continue also to give people their proper due for all the work they put in. It looks like we're reaching the end of our show here, McGinnis, so I guess that means it's my time to shine. I'd like to remind you that the Grill My Truth, the NFL show, and I guess the Sam and Sam show by proxy are sponsored by Manscaped.com. Use promo code TGG20 to get 20% off your first order and free shipping at Manscaped.com. We really appreciate it if you could do this. It helps the show out quite a bit. Everyone who uses the promo code helps us out, and hopefully we can get Manscaped as a full-time sponsor. It would keep us from going under. We would really appreciate that if we could get some extra help there. Also, it's a good product. It's better than what you can find in the store, and if you use the promo code, it's going to be cheaper than what you can buy in store. So I consider giving it a look and just looking at it right now, seeing what you think, and potentially buying it. We would just appreciate your thoughts. But McGinnis, I guess they were done for the day, right?
Yeah. Unless somehow we get a third podcast that we hear about between now and like 11.
Yeah, because we've done back-to-back shows now. We've been going at it for almost an hour and a half. My voice is tired here, McGinnis, so honestly, I'm going to go lie down now and get a little sleep. But thanks for coming on today. Thanks for filling in for Mike. I'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And for now, this has been the Sam and Sam Show. We really appreciate you guys showing up. Ordinarily, we do this on Friday at 9:30, I believe is the usual time. We had to move up today because I'm moving out, and I'm going back home because I'm almost done college. So I will not be here Friday night. We will not be doing a show this Friday. We look to be back to our normal coverage next Friday, and we hope to see you then. But for now, I'm Sam Teets. He's Sam McGinnis. We appreciate you all. Thanks for watching.